Good afternoon and welcome to the Vancouver City Council meeting of Tuesday, December 14th, which is reconvened from Tuesday, November 16th. This meeting is being convened by electronic means as authorized under our procedural bylaw. If any council member attending by electronic means loses connection during the voting process, staff are available to get you online quickly. Information has been circulated. Video of council members speaking, presentations, and vote results will be projected on the live stream and available. And just remember that if you are attending remotely, you have to leave your video on to confirm quorum. As always, we acknowledge we're on the unceded homelands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people, and thank them for their generosity to all who live and work and play on their lands. And thanks so much to staff for everything that you do. We're especially thinking of you as we move into the holiday season. So thanks. Clerks, can we have the roll call, please?
Mayor Stewart in the chair. Councillor Carr. Here. Councillor DiGenova. Councillor Fry.
Here.
Councillor Swanson. She's muted there. I see you there, Councillor Swanson.
Here.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Councillor Hardwick. Councillor Wiebe.
Present.
Councillor Boyle.
Present.
Councillor Dominato.
Present.
Councillor Bly. And Councillor Kirby-Young.
Present.
You have quorum, Mayor Stewart.
Thanks very much. So council, we have, first I'm going to remind the public that if you want to follow along on Twitter at Van City Clerk for updates on the progress of the meeting, you can watch it on a YouTube link or on the city's website. You can always send in comments on any item to using the web form, and that is also available on Twitter in terms of the link. And in terms of our longstanding commitment to respect for all genders, just to remind council to address staff and speakers avoiding using gendered honorifics and instead refer to people by their first and last name, role, or title. Today we have one unfinished business item, 4 council members' motions, notice of council members' motions, and then our final item is new business inquiries and other matters. Plan for the day is to go from now until 5, then break for dinner, return at 6 p.m. to finish things off. Hopefully we'll be done today. If we're not finished today, we'll have to come back tomorrow afternoon, and I can get those times from the clerk for you. We have one item of unfinished business today, that is streamlining the rental around local shopping areas. On November 2nd, 4th, and 9th, we held a public hearing on the above matter. On November 9th, following the close of the speakers list and receipt of public comments, we closed that and we referred a debate and decision to the council meeting on November 16th as unfinished business. On November 16th, we postponed closing comments, debate, and decision to December 14th due to time constraints. Councillors DeGenova, Hardwick, Dominato, and Swanson were absent for the portion of this item after 10 p.m. on November 9th and confirmed at the council meeting on November 16th that they had reviewed the proceedings of the meeting they missed and would therefore be voting on the application. We will start with closing comments from staff. As a reminder, the applicant is the General Manager of Planning, Urban Design, and Sustainability. Then move to any questions to staff, and then move, once we've moved and seconded the report, debate and decision. So any closing comments from staff?
Yes, Mayor Stewart, thank you. So thank you, Mayor Stewart, and members of council. I'm Dan Garrison. I'm the Assistant Director of Planning responsible for our Housing Policy and Regulation Division. And I will be making a few closing remarks and one note of housekeeping before handing off to Edna Cho, our Senior Housing Policy Planner, to finish staff's closing remarks. So we are here to conclude on the matter of the streamlining rental around local shopping areas. Following the public hearing that went over 3 days in early November, as Mayor Stewart indicated. Staff would like to begin our closing remarks by thanking the many members of the public who either submitted written correspondence or who came out to speak to council. Whether they spoke in support or favor, or in support or in opposition of the proposed zoning amendments and policy changes, their commentary was thoughtful, and it was informed, and it demonstrated a real caring for their community. So staff were very impressed by the speakers who came out to speak. We'd also like to thank council, the members of council, for the time you've invested in this process and for the thoughtfulness of your questions, both to speakers and to staff. Staff received over 20 questions from council in writing and responded last week in a memo dated December 9th, which is also now posted on the council agenda on the website. As a small piece of housekeeping, I also just wanted to inform you of a change that staff will be making to the effective enactment date for any bylaws that are adopted today. Staff will be moving that date from January 15th to February 14th, just to give our permit processing staff time to prepare for implementation. And with that, I'll now ask Edna Cho, Senior Housing Policy Planner, to conclude staff's closing remarks. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'm Edna Cho, Senior Planner in Housing Policy in PDS. The work of streamlining rental has been underway for over 2 years, and during the significant public consultation that was carried out over that time and over the 3 nights of public hearing in November, we have heard a wide range of firmly held opinions. We heard from over 100 speakers and received 1,082 pieces of correspondence, the highest in recent years. 620 of those were in favor and 444 were opposed to the proposal. So what did we hear? We heard from renters who are looking for secure, purpose-built rental housing away from busy arterial streets, who believe these changes don't go far enough. We heard from residents and climate activists that these changes are a necessary first step to create a more walkable city to address the climate emergency. And we've heard from residents who think new market rental isn't affordable enough, even as builders tell us that these rents are barely enough to cover the high cost of land construction. We also heard from property owners who feel the changes go too far, put the character of low-density neighborhoods at risk, and could drive up land values. The discourse has been divided. It's a case of far too much versus not nearly far enough. However, there were common ground on some issues. People agree that housing costs in Vancouver are high and rising. Rental housing is needed as 3/4 of net new households are renters, and that ownership is out of reach for many and will likely continue to be so. So given this polarization and these areas of common ground, staff have approached this work with the principles of balance and equity in mind. The policy has been scaled back to preserve areas with more character and heritage homes. The new zones keep building forms at a moderate scale, 6 stories and under on arterials, and 4 stories and under on local streets. Yet we're still ensuring the proposed changes will incentivize and streamline new rentals. To ensure alignment with the Climate Emergency Action Plan and the Vancouver Plan, we've layered on green building requirements and tightened the locational criteria to ensure new rental housing is located near shopping and amenities to create walkable 15-minute neighborhoods. So key issues. We heard some recurring themes during the public hearing that we'd like to touch on. Consultation and process. We heard there wasn't enough consultation in general, as well as concerns regarding notices for this public hearing specifically. So over the last 2.5 years, there has been over 20,000 points of contact and many engagement opportunities. 3,500 participated in surveys, meetings, and information sessions. There are 8 info sessions, 6 in person and 2 virtual, 40 one-on-one meetings, and 25 stakeholder meetings. There's been broad support received from residents citywide for the concepts and initiatives, with over 72% of survey respondents supporting more rental housing in more neighborhoods. And overall, we received 107,000 impressions from people visiting the city's streamlining rental website. For the public hearing itself, staff followed standard notification practices, including notifying those on our email lists, putting ads in newspapers, as well as social media, and putting posters in community centers and libraries in order to reach a broad audience. As per city practice, we do not notify individual property owners in surrounding areas on citywide changes to zoning. This is the same practice followed in 2004 when secondary suites were legalized across the city, during the introduction of laneway housing in 2009, and the changes to introduce duplexes in RS zones in 2018. Legal services staff have reviewed these processes and advised that they meet all requirements outlined in the Vancouver Charter. We also heard concerns and confusion around the removal of public hearings for new rental developments. We want to be clear that the proposed zoning amendments only result in the removal of a public hearing requirement in the C2 zoning districts proposed in this report. This was done with an eye to equity, as the majority of developments in C2 areas are 4-story condominiums, which does not require a public hearing. The proposed amendments simply seek to level the playing field for rental. To be absolutely clear, new rental projects in RS and RT zones will still go through a rezoning, a simplified rezoning process in which a public hearing will still be required for each project. This is similar to what is currently done for Canby corridor townhouses within the RM8 zones. The map we showed in the staff presentation, which has been pulled up on the screen, with the blue and red area, is a zoning enabling policy map and not a zoning map. The proposal being discussed will not result in the rezoning of any properties in low-density areas. In other words, no existing zoning is being changed. Rather, we are proposing 3 new rental district schedules that can be used in existing low-density areas in conjunction with a simplified rezoning process. Another key issue we heard was around affordability and land values. We heard a desire to deepen the affordability of new rental housing. Independent third-party financial testing found deeper affordability beyond market rates could be achieved in RS and RT areas in 6-story developments and can include a percentage of below-market units. Dialing up affordability will drive these projects into higher-cost concrete construction and much taller tower forms. Staff are exploring these opportunities for deeper affordability through other planning initiatives such as Broadway Plan and the Vancouver Plan, and through partnerships with senior governments and community. I would note that none of these funding partnerships can be successful without the policies and zonings in place to enable the developments, and we heard this from the community housing sector during the public hearing. We also heard questions around how these policies will impact land values. Third-party testing confirmed these rental policies will not create additional pressure on land values. It's important to note that this testing isn't theoretical. It's based on more than a decade of experience with rental incentive policies in C2 and low-density areas. Highest and best use in these areas will continue to be the new build ownership housing allowed under existing zoning. There seemed to be interest from some council members to separate the C2 and low density changes so that they can be voted on separately. We have checked with clerks and legal services on the procedure bylaw and confirmed this is possible. Should council wish to vote separately on these proposals, an amendment would first need to be made to recommendation A III to add the definition of residential rental tenure from Appendix A directly into the proposed new zoning districts. This will allow the 2 proposals to be voted on separately in accordance with the procedure bylaw. If council would like to proceed with such an amendment, staff can advise on the language necessary. And if the amendment passes, clerks can advise on how to group the recommendations together during the voting. In conclusion, this application from the General Manager of Planning, Urban Design and Sustainability is to amend the C2 zones to streamline 6-story rental buildings without a rezoning, and to add new standard rental district schedules for use in future rezoning applications in low-density areas. This work builds upon and improves on our existing rental policies that have applied to these C2 and low-density areas for over a decade. This proposal will open established neighborhoods to share their communities and welcome new households. Staff have heard the importance of maintaining existing neighborhood character and have incorporated this feedback, keeping the scale and pace of change incremental and gradual. In addition, the proposals in this report will encourage rental housing close to daily needs and transit to promote more walkable communities. This will be an important first action council can take in alignment with the Climate Emergency Action Plan to meet carbon targets called for under Big Move 1. Thank you. And we have the full staff team here this afternoon, as well as Blair Erb from Coriolis Consulting to answer any additional questions you may have.
Thanks so much. There are a number of questions. Councillor Hardwick, the staff, up to 5 minutes.
Thanks very much. I'd just like to confirm, I know, Edna, you just said this, but I want to make sure it's clearly understood. If council wants to only approve the 6-story rentals in C2 zones and not the RR zones, you're confirming that we could approve A1, A2, and vote against A3? And the amended C2 zones would allow for rental tenure on their own with these two recommendations approved, A1 and A2, correct?
That's correct. We would have to first make an amendment to AIII to add the residential rental tenure districts into the schedule separately in order that we can vote on them separately. And then, yes, then you can separate them that way.
Great, thank you very much. My next question is how much of an increase in zone capacity does this represent overall? At current rates of construction, how many years would it take to build out all of the extra density units that are proposed in this plan? Maybe that's a Dan question.
Yep, on. Yeah, we did not take a zoned capacity approach to looking at the development potential created through the policy changes. We looked at what the development capacity might be over a 10-year period in order to estimate how much potential development would happen, and we looked at found that an estimate of about 2,000 to 2,700 units could be accommodated in the C2 zoning district and up to 2,000 units in the RS and RT districts. So that was the approach that we took to estimating the impact of the proposed changes.
So ballpark 5,000-ish households representing maybe 10,000 population.
Well, certainly in terms of the households, we're estimating, 4,700, so 5,000 ballpark new households. How many folks live in those households is another question, and we will be coming back to council, of course, in the spring related to the Vancouver plan and housing needs assessments around looking at population per household.
Well, we'll have any adjustment after the census that we're just finishing up, but the current mean average household size in Vancouver proper is 2.2 individuals per household, correct?
Yeah, that is correct. However, we know that the majority of the housing that we're building now under the new policies, and particularly in the rental policies, are apartments, which do have a lower proportion, and I don't have the number offhand, but have a lower proportion than the overall average, which includes detached houses and townhouses and other types that have higher proportions. So
that's right, it's the average.
Yeah,
but
that's right.
Thank you for answering.
Thanks, Councillor Swanson. We're on to Councillor Dejanova.
Thanks. I think that was Councillor Hardwick. Pardon me, Mayor Stewart.
Who did I say?
Councillor Swanson. I just
Oh,
wanted you to
sorry
know
about
she's
that.
still on the list to ask
I think
questions.
it's
Thanks.
hopefully the last day. I'm a little punchy here.
I'm with you. I'm with you there. Thanks. I did have some questions, and it's specifically on the C2 and understanding that these are changes specifically to the district schedule. However, they will affect zoning. So it's not exact zoning changes. So I'm hoping staff might be able to answer in looking at examples and hearing from some of the speakers the concern there that this may drive some of the mom and pop shops further out of the city of Vancouver, including some of the local grocery stores and corner stores that council had supported. I'm just wondering if you could speak to and or confirm if at all this will change BC Assessment's view of best and highest use. Sorry, I should finish my question so you can figure out who's going to answer it. I'm just wondering how it will affect the taxes that current C2 building owners will be assessed to pay. I understand that's provincial, but that is affected through zoning. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. I think Blair Erb from Coriolis Consulting is on the line to answer questions about assessed value.
Sure. Hi, Councillor Blair Erb here through the mayor. Councillor, the work that we've done on this topic suggests that the market value of C2 sites should not increase in any material way due to the proposed changes to the zoning district. The highest and best use of these properties will continue to be the existing either the existing building that is on the site or the development rights that already exist for condominium development up to 2.5 FSR. So we wouldn't expect any change to assessments. And on your other question about would it displace existing businesses, businesses, I assume, would be displaced through redevelopment of C2 sites. But if they are not redeveloped as rental sites, they will be redeveloped as condominium sites. So we don't think there's any significant change on that topic either.
Thank you. I'm just wondering if maybe our staff then could confirm, based on the information from Coriolis, if BC assessment has confirmed whether or not there will be a change. Whether the changes in this district schedule could trigger changes in the way that we tax C2 properties.
Thank you, Councillor. We haven't confirmed that with BC Assessment. That's not something we've followed up with them on.
Okay, thank you. I'm further going to ask the question. This council had I won't remember if the vote's unanimous, but we did pass a motion to protect local corner stores and grocery stores. Many of those corner and grocery stores are located in C2 zone. I'm not sure exactly where they are here on in these district schedules. I'm just hoping that you could tell me how that policy direction that council has given fits into this and how we're protecting them through this, especially if we're not sure if they're going to be paying higher taxes. I appreciate Coriolis's opinion, but considering BC assessment assesses the value, which the tax rate is based on, I'm concerned not having that information as to whether or not that will change. So is there any way to understand that policy piece? I could come back on the queue. I have about a minute. I don't want to there.
Good afternoon, Paula Huber. I think you're asking about the local grocery store work that Andrew Pask was doing, and the majority of those are off arterials. They're not C2 zoning. So that work is deeper into the neighborhoods typically.
And the little restaurants, those types of but I do know that there are some local stores on arterials.
Well, yes, there are local stores, but if you're specifically talking about the neighborhood shops and the work that was done in July this past year, that those are more focused deeper into the neighborhoods and not typically on C2 sites, which tend to be on arterials.
And those aren't necessarily the little restaurants and mom and pop shops.
Well, I wouldn't say it's exclusively like that, but the majority of them are deeper into the neighborhoods, the little corner grocery stores. But I think Matt Burke has some data.
I only have 10 seconds, so I appreciate the data, but I understand that probably out of time. Maybe someone else.
Councillor Swanson.
Yeah, thanks for answering a lot of our questions here. First question is, if this goes through, would the city consider buying land in the RS and RT zones for?
Oh, you're on mute, Councillor Swanson.
Hi, Councillor. Thank you for the question. We heard you. So decisions around site acquisition are decisions that are made by in relation to the Vancouver Affordable Housing Endowment Fund and the strategic direction that fund will take, which will be provided by council, and also through the capital planning process. And so it is that the zoning and policies that are proposed today, and if council adopts them, will create opportunities for non-market housing in these locations. Whether or not the city acquires sites will be in those areas will be determined through other processes.
Okay, so, second question. Are we requiring underground parking for the new rental buildings, and if so, why?
Hello, Councillor. My name is Sander. I'm with Community Planning. These projects are going to be subject to the standard parking requirements specified by the parking bylaw and all of the reductions that are also available to them. So through the parking bylaw, there's been a significant reduction in parking requirements for rental projects. And there's also the transportation management demand reductions that could lead up to 60% reduction on parking minimums for rental projects that are in close proximity to transit. This policy has catered the locational criteria to proximity to transit to be able to maximize on these reductions. We anticipate that the mixed-use development will indeed trigger underground parking, but we are trying to enable as much surface parking as possible on the off and on arterial options. In order to do so, the design guidelines have been provided with a set of guidance to maximize on the transit demand management. And city staff is also working on bringing forward to council in the new year measures for eliminating parking minimums, which these projects will also be entertained under and will help reduce that demand even further.
Okay, thanks. Third question. If 4-story strata is the highest and best use, why would we estimate that we can actually get more rental if this goes through? Wouldn't everybody just keep doing strata?
So I can start this answer, and maybe Blair Erb, from Corliss, can supplement. So we have provided additional density to enable market rental to be an option that some owners or developers may choose over time. We don't expect that. We do expect that condos will continue to be the preferred development option in C2, but with the additional density and the incentives we provide, the testing shows that in some cases it will be viable for some owners and developers to provide rental.
Okay, thanks. Fourth question is for Coriolis. When you were doing the number crunching on this, did you factor in the possibility that rental housing developers, even market ones, could get senior government financing at a low interest rate?
Hi, Councillor Swanson. Yes, we assumed very favorable financing rates for all of the rental scenarios that we analyzed.
What rate did you assume?
I don't have it right in front of me, but it was in the 2% vicinity, which is available currently, but that bounces around month to month.
Okay, you also talked about a cost allowance for land assembly. What's that?
Yeah, that's something that is is typically assumed within any financial analysis like this. What's going on there is the notion that if a developer needs to purchase 2 or 3 houses side by each simultaneously in order to create a development site, the owners of those houses are unlikely to sell all simultaneously without receiving slightly more than what their house is worth on the open market.
We're at the 5 minutes, so I'm going to have to move on to the next.
So that's what that's covering.
Just a point of procedure, Mayor.
Go ahead, Councillor Dejanova.
I forgot to ask this in my questions, but I did send in a number of questions on November the...
Not a point of procedure.
It is, it's a question.
I'm telling you as chair, it's not, and we're going to go to Councillor Fry.
Okay, I have another point of procedure, just quickly. Will
go
those
ahead.
questions that I publicly circulated to Mayor and Council be answered, as this is the continuation of a public hearing, along with everyone else's questions that were sent in?
Public hearing part has closed. We are now in debate and decision, so you can ask questions to staff at this point, but there won't be a section where staff will be reading out replies. Councillor Fry.
Thanks, Mayor. So first question, what would a public hearing and rezoning look like on the RR zones now? Does this sort of impart the same amount of time as we would typically see on a rezoning application?
So this would be similar to the what you see in the Canby Corridor RM8 rezonings. So it would be the process is simplified because it's not a negotiated unique CD1 each time you're creating. You're rezoning to a zone which has very clear rules. So the architects, everybody knows upfront exactly what they're meant to do. In terms of the time savings, we estimate potentially this could save maybe half the time of the rezoning, up to 6 months.
Okay, well, that's beneficial. Now, do we anticipate, similar to the changes that the province has implemented on the Local Government Act, that they may, at a future time, amend the Vancouver Charter to then say this could just skip public hearing altogether?
I don't think I can guess what the province may do on the Vancouver Charter. I don't know if Grant might want to comment on that.
But that is the same context, essentially, that if it's in an OCP, according to the Local Government Act, it would just sort of pass public hearing altogether.
Well, I guess there's some differences because Vancouver doesn't have an OCP. But I guess the province can always amend the Vancouver Charter in a way that that can simplify public hearings.
Okay. That's definitely helpful to know that it does speed up the process. So I want to just touch a little bit on lot assemblies and frontages. I know that there's some articulation in some of the sub-C sections and similarly some of the RRs, but there's some that have no limits on lot assembly or maximum frontages. And I'm wondering if, does this necessarily, do lot assemblies impact the cost of land and therefore the cost of the final product? And would it be thoughtful to implement maximum frontages, also to preserve, in the sense of C2s, that kind of granular fit of small business?
Hello, Paul Chang, Senior Development Planner. Currently, in all of the C2 zones and the clone zones, there is no frontage maximum in terms of developable lots. However, in some of the zones, there are maximums with respect to overall frontages for CRU sizes. So some of them dictate that the CRU shouldn't be more than 50 feet in width, for instance, and that is a way of guaranteeing that the businesses themselves won't be, for instance, big box stores or something like that, more of a localized mom and pop typology. With respect to overall maximum frontages, as I said, C2s don't currently have that, but what we're seeing most of the time right now is not that many large-scale consolidated lots for C2 development. Usually they're probably about 100 to 150 feet in size for the development permit applications that we see right now.
So extrapolating on that a little bit, do limits on lot assemblies dampen the amount of speculation and then the land lift that comes with that?
Do maximum limits or minimum limits? Because
Maximum limits.
we would probably, minimum limits, Councillor, sir?
Maximum limit. So if there was a maximum limit on the amount of lot assemblies that went on, would that dampen speculation and the cost of the land assembly total?
It seems to be, just from an experience point of view of what staff have seen, it seems that the more lots that need to be assembled, the more difficult it is to assemble. So a lot of the times, if it just takes one holdout, one property owner to hold out and not sell, to actually make it too hard to actually assemble the entirety of a block, for instance. Overall, I'd say that having maximum limits would actually help to make developments, wouldn't necessarily make developments more likely to happen. However, having minimum frontages would actually make it more difficult for development.
Okay, I'm gonna hold for that, and thank you.
Thanks, Brett. The 5. So on to Councillor Bly.
Thanks very much. So just continuing on with a few questions, I'm curious if I can understand from staff how the consultation on this policy effort differs from other major planning efforts. And I know we've got the Vancouver plan underway, but others as well that have happened over time, because there has been public criticism that the consultation hasn't felt as extensive as it typically would be, including notifying those in the affected areas of the proposed policy.
So we undertook extensive consultation.
If I can just clarify, because we have limited time, I'm just asking what are the differences, the discerning differences between the consultation effort in this one and other major planning efforts? And maybe there aren't any, and public perception is not correct, in which case you could say that, but I just want to get clear on the differences.
Yeah, so in terms of the notification process, we followed standard procedure in terms of notification. So there wasn't differences between this and other changes we've made citywide on zoning.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I'm curious now about hearing, and it could be our through the Coriolis work. There's been much discussion, and we're going back a month, around feasibility of anything other than the 4-story buildings in the RR zones in terms of essentially the land economics and the feasibility to build, let's say, the 3.5-story row homes or the 8 multiplex. So I'm just wondering if staff can quickly recap. What is the likelihood that we're going to see the various options built and not just necessarily the 4-story apartment building?
So Blair Erb, our consultant, can answer that question.
Sure. Thanks, Edna. Thanks, Councillor. What our work showed, we, as you alluded to, we analyzed a wide variety of different types of rental projects, and the 4 to 6 story apartment projects were definitely the ones that seemed to perform the best. When we got down to 3 stories or less and into townhouse type forms, the financial analysis does not look good. Now, but it's being done from the perspective of a private developer. So it's possible that homeowners or nonprofits or other interested parties would pursue those forms of housing, but they're not something that is viable from a private sector perspective.
Okay, so just to quickly jump in, because again, limited time, how often do you see homeowners becoming rental developers without any strata option or looking at something that would be far more distinct in character and what have you? So you're saying not-for-profits, sure, could do, but the land is super expensive. And then homeowners would be the likely other candidate to build rental housing?
Yeah, I'm not saying that it's something that we would expect to happen frequently, but on occasion, it's possible that someone may want to build a project to accommodate their own household and family members.
So how does, and I appreciate that. So I'm just looking to understand, there's a lot of number crunching that went into this, and we're hearing about it, but we don't really see it in this report. And each option has been presented as sort of on an even playing field, and yet when I get to understand more about the thinking behind it, I'm consistently hearing that it's quite unlikely that anything other than the residential apartment 4-story will actually be built. So I think it's important to understand why they're being presented in a way that makes them seem like they're all viable projects, when in fact what we're hearing is they're not.
Yeah, I can maybe respond to that, Councillor. I think we definitely wanted to explore opportunities. We've heard a lot of interest in missing middle housing through our various processes, including currently through the Vancouver Plan process. And so we did want to put forward those opportunities, and staff put a lot of work into figuring out the architecture and the lots and whatnot. In terms of those, we do know, and you're correct, that from the financial analysis perspective, they aren't likely to be in most cases sort of commercially viable from a development perspective. But there are a lot of there has been a lot of interest expressed by landowners in terms of providing housing opportunities for their families. You do see a lot of homeowners building, for example, laneway housing. We have
yes, but that's very distinct from a multi-rental.
And that's 5 minutes.
Yeah, that's true.
Councillor Dominato.
Thanks, Mayor. I think I'll pick up maybe questions from there. One is just to, if all of the proposed recommendations are adopted today, does it preclude similar type homes, but in a different tenureship in these areas? So for example, we have a motion coming in January, we have the Vancouver plan.
would fee simple ownership or stratified ownership of row homes or an 8-plex or 6-plex be allowed or permitted in these new rental zones?
So adopting this work today won't, it means you can still go ahead with other forms of tenure that are being currently explored through Vancouver plan. So it doesn't mean that just because this has been approved that in these same areas you may, there could be other tenures as well. That's still a decision and work that's underway through that planning process.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to clarify that, given that we're sort of dealing with this in advance, so thank you. I want to ask a question about the affordable housing choices in term rezoning policy, and I'm looking at Appendix M. And the indication that only 19 projects were approved through that policy framework since 2012. And I'm curious what the barriers were to that. So we're moving in a new direction to adopt a different policy framework. What did we learn from that policy framework to inform this one so we see potentially a different outcome?
Yeah, so I think one thing to note is the original 2012 policy. It was a bit vague. There was different options that could be explored and different tenures, and we found through implementation that a lot of those were just really difficult through implementation. And what actually worked best was the rental. So and in doing so, what we found actually is that in the first few years of the policy, we didn't see a lot of rental projects, but that's actually picked up in the last 4 years. So a majority of those projects have actually been approved in the last 4 years for rental.
Okay, thank you. And then in the context of concerns around displacement, appreciated the summary in Table 1 on page 3 of 7 around the purpose-built rental inventory and stock. Do we have a sense in the proposed rental zones, the inventory of rental that's already there that's not purpose-built but is in existing homes, because a lot of homes are rented, they may be owned by someone else, but they are serving as rental, and so are secondary suites and then laneways as well. Do we have a sense of that inventory and what the implications are for displacement? I hope my question's clear.
Yeah, so we did an analysis of the displacement risk in the areas that are eligible for the under this policy in the low density areas. I don't remember the full number in front of me regarding the secondary suites, but what we do know is that in terms of loss of rental, that the majority of the units that are being lost are through the redevelopment of existing homes to new ownership housing compared to rental.
Okay.
Yeah, and within the rental, under the AHC, under the 12, since 2012, there's been 49 units of rental lost in those, with a gain of 900 units.
Okay, thank you. And with those redevelopments, though, we didn't see some replacement of rental. And I'm thinking contextually of examples in my own neighborhood where homes have been redeveloped, but then added a secondary suite as well as a laneway at the same time.
So we don't have that data. What we know is that, when they get redeveloped, they can get redeveloped to replace the existing suite. Sometimes they lose a suite and sometimes they add a suite. What we do know, though, when we did that analysis was that there was a potential of 430 to 650 units that were potentially lost through just the redevelopment to ownership housing.
Okay, thank you. And then circling back on the land economics, I did hear and appreciate the recap around what's the likelihood of what we might see on local streets and it being more 4-story. Is there a risk that even that, from an economic standpoint, is not feasible, even the 4-story wood frame on those local streets for apartments? I know there's differing opinions out there. I'm just curious what.
Blair Erb, can you answer?
Sure, I can. Hi, Councillor Blair here. So, yeah, the 4-story form is probably the weakest from a financial perspective of the apartments scenarios that we analyzed, but they're still profitable. We think that there will be some interest. It will probably be very localized in terms of where you see interest and where it actually occurs.
Thank you. Councillor Hardwick, you have 2 minutes left.
Yes, Mayor, with my remaining time, I would like to move the report. Is that possible?
You can. There are other councillors on the queue for questions, but you can move it if you like.
I would like to move it.
Do we have a seconder?
Second.
Okay, thanks so much. We're going to move on to the main queue. Councillors can always ask questions through points of information if they have them. Okay, so Councillor Hardwick, you moved the report. You're first on the queue. Let's put you up there. Okay, whenever you're ready, up 5 minutes.
Amendment, which was circulated to council and through the clerk.
Okay.
Got it handy there.
Do we have a seconder for this amendment?
Second.
Sorry, I didn't hear that. Who was that?
Second. Councillor DiGenova.
Councillor Dejanova seconded. Thank you so much. We are going now to an amendment queue. Councillor Weave is first on the list. Go ahead, Councillor Weave, up to 5 minutes.
Yeah, through you to the mover of the motion, I'm wondering why this was moved prior to allowing councillors to ask questions, recognizing this is such an important piece of work. And I'm wondering why this was moved before we're able to answer questions that might help us better understand where decision we should make.
I have a point of procedure, Mayor. It's Councillor Bly.
I'm just going to freeze your clock there, Councillor Weave. Councillor Bly, point of procedure.
I'm waiting to hear Councillor Hardwick introduce the amendment.
Well, she had opportunity to put herself on the list. I didn't see
As the
her on the list.
mover of the amendment, she gets.
You'd be arguing with me, and this is a point of procedure.
It's about procedure, and it's way off base right now.
Look, if you're going to comment, then I'm going to cut these off. Points of procedure are asked for clarifying rules, not to debate.
Point of procedure.
This is how it's going to go. Okay, Councillor Dejanova.
Could you just please clarify where we are in the process and what should happen now, Mayor Stewart? That's a question.
Yeah, Councillor,
I'd just like to know right now what we're doing.
I'm going to explain it to you if you give me a chance. Councillor Hardwick moved the report. It was seconded by you. It moved to the queue. Then there was we have a queue to debate the amendment to the report, which Councillor Weave is on the queue, and the rest of the folks on the queue are on the list. So, Councillor Weave, you've had a question to the mover of the motion. Councillor Hardwick, would you like to answer?
If it would have been normal for me to have been able to set this up. I didn't know I had to jump back on the queue instantly when I was still standing ready to introduce this.
The question
Now,
is,
having
why did
said
you
that,
move it?
I asked the mayor if this was the time to do it. I didn't just dive in, and I asked the question, Councillor Weeb, and the reason I did, and as the mayor said, it did not prevent council from asking further questions through him to staff. Moreover, we just received a 12-page memo with elaborating on questions from council to staff on Friday. And again, this is not a new discussion. And I don't think the mayor was saying that this would prevent any further questions to staff at this time. But I did ask the question up front if this was an appropriate time, and I was told that I was in a position to do that, and that's why I did it.
Okay.
Councillor Weave.
Yeah, I'll be voting against the referral. I can only ask questions on this referral motion and not on the content of the actual report because we're now in an amendment queue. As the mayor stated, there were still councillors on the queue to ask questions, and some of the questions have not been responded yet. So I will not be voting for this referral report. I think this is important work. I think there's a lot of great stuff in this report, and I look forward to how we can work to move this forward. Thank you.
Councillor Dejanova.
I would like to move that we suspend the procedure bylaw to allow for another round of questions.
I don't know if we can do that, so I'm going to have to check with the clerk. So I'll just stop your clock there, Councillor Dejanova, and I'll come right back to you.
Worth a try.
Hey, Council, I've spoken with the clerk, or we've corresponded. The way forward here is that if folks wanted to ask more questions, we could move a second round of debate and decision through which you can ask points of information. So that's the only way forward here. Once a motion has been moved and seconded, it is in debate. That's where we're at. So if you'd like to ask questions, you can do so through points of information. And if you need more time, you can always ask for another round of debate and decision. Councillor Dejanova, you.
I'll just use my time and try to be helpful to make sure everyone can have their questions answered. I've been in this situation before. To move a second round of debate.
Okay. Do we have a seconder for that? It'll be on this amendment though. Right now.
Sure. We can always do it again, I suppose.
We can.
I don't have any other questions, but others do, I understand.
Okay, I didn't hear a seconder, so we'll go on to Councillor Hardwick.
I seconded it.
I didn't hear a seconder.
It was seconded by Hardwick and Chambers.
Okay, thank you. So do we have all in favor of a second round of debate decision on this amendment, say yay?
Yay.
Opposed, nay? I don't hear any opposed.
Nay.
Okay, so we'll have a vote on this then. All in favor of a second round of debate and decision. We'll call a vote here. Council, that's passed. So we do have the second round available to you if you'd like it. Councillor Hardwick, you're over to you.
No, I'll pass until the end. I tried to put myself at the bottom of the queue, but it didn't work.
Councillor Boyle, on the amendment.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm going to speak strongly against this amendment. These recommended policies already got sent back to staff for more consultation a year and a half ago when they first came forward. We have heard through that consultation broad support from the public for moving forward on the proposals. We heard the summary from staff that there, of course, is mixed opinions on it, but that there is strong support for more rental, for making it easier to build that rental. And I just think if there are councillors who don't want us to do this, then they should just vote against it and stop suggesting that more consultation will get the answer that they're looking for on this. I would love to see this whole report move forward, but I don't think continuing to punt it back and stall out shows any kind of leadership on the issues we were elected to address. So I hope that this whole thing passes strongly, and I don't think that continuing to send it back is the direction to go.
Councillor Carr?
Thanks. Thanks, Mayor. I will be speaking in opposition to this, and the reason is that this is, in fact, I may even question whether this is in order, because we've already done this. We already referred this report to the Vancouver plan last summer, last July. We sent, it was us making the decision to proceed with this as a quick start under the Vancouver plan. So staff did that in very extensive consultations. We had a report, a summary of that this morning, but there were 318,000 addressed postcards, there were 12 neighborhood workshops, there were 10 pop-up tent events, 7 stakeholder meetings, 10 youth focus events, and pretty soon I'm going to break into the 12 nights of Christmas. Meetings with MST and responses which led to the conclusion after 3,300 responses with a focus on complete neighborhoods and a very detailed questionnaire asking people where they wanted, if they wanted more rental housing, where they wanted it, what kind of heights. All of that data has already been collected. 77% agreed that we should include a range of housing options in all neighborhoods. 75% support rental options on residential streets. 83% support new housing around community assets. 68% support increased height and density for low and moderate income housing. Mr. Mayor, given that this is already referred from us into the Vancouver plan last summer, I would ask you to rule whether this is actually in order.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. I will take this away and check with the clerks and city manager and come back to you. I'll
I have
stop
a
your
point of order, Mayor. I believe that councillors need to cite the section of the procedure bylaw, and I'm always required to do it, so I'm hopeful that that can apply to all councillors.
A point of order on a point of order.
You got it.
I think that holds. So, Councillor Carr, would you have the number that is?
Man, I have my old document here. I'm not sure if it's in the same order. That it's, sorry. Mine says section 8.7F.
Okay. 8.7F, and I've answered Councillor Kirby-Young's point of order, and I will get back to yours, Councillor Carr.
Thank you.
All right, Council, I've had an opportunity to speak with the city manager and clerk. I'm going to rule that this is in order. The reasons why is because Vancouver plan is a very long process. There is an opportunity, to bring this back at some point later in the plan. So technically, it's not out of order. There's nothing that within the procedural bylaw or the charter that it contradicts. And so I'll turn the floor back over to you, Councillor Carr, with 2.5 minutes left.
I'm okay at this point. Thanks, Mayor.
Okay, Councillor Kirby-Young.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I'm going to speak in opposition to the amendment. I won't try not to repeat the comments from my other fellow councillors, but I would say that I just think that council should have the courage of their convictions, whatever they may be, with respect to this report, and vote accordingly as to whether or not they feel that they want to support it or they do not want to support it based on the perceived merits of the report and what they have heard from the public, and how they weigh that information. I look at this and I think our council term is 4 years. This process has taken 2, over half of that. The previous referral back to the plan was a year. And we are, and I actually think fairly now, being criticized for not making movement on housing policy. Not everybody agrees on policy, but at some point we have to make a decision and stand for something. And so a wholesale referral of the entire report back, I think, is abdicating the responsibility of council, which is why we get to sit in these chairs, is to make those decisions, which may or may not be popular, but it's our job to make them. And so I will not support a referral. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Kirby-Young. Councillor Dejanova, I did have, don't usually enter in debates here as I'm chairing, but I would request that you take the chair while I just say a few words.
Go ahead, Mayor.
Thank you very much. I'll just advance myself on the queue. Oh, sorry, I'll let clerks handle that. I'd just like to say that that I'm against the referral. This proposal, as it's before us, is for 4,000 rental units across a city that already has well over 300,000 homes of various types. So 4,000 units over 10 years is 400 units a year. This is not the kind of silver bullet that's going to reduce the extreme stress that people are feeling over housing provision in the city. It will help. It won't. It won't fix it, but it'll show that signal strongly that we're going in the right direction. If we were to refer again, basically killing this because we're just going to get the same public input that we've had that staff have gone through and Councillor Carr went through in good detail. We do have to make a decision here. I do see another amendment floating around about splitting this in half, perhaps. So that would mean we might move ahead with 2,000 units over 10 years, which is 200 units a year. I mean, this is not some kind of gargantuan decision, but it does show that we're at least listening to people and saying that we need to get housing built here, not imaginary units, but real ones. And I strongly think that this is one step in that process. So I'll definitely be voting against a referral and hope that councillors will vote to get this underway so we can, get folks into new homes, which is so important. So thank you, Councillor Dejanova. I'm happy to take the chair back if you're happy to relinquish it.
Of course, thank you.
Thank you so much. Councillor Dominato, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor. And in brief, I'm speaking in opposition to this referral. While I have some concerns around this report, largely about will it achieve the outcomes that it sets out to do, and particularly will it deliver some of the rental housing that families would like to see in the city. I do not support referring this wholesale back to the Vancouver plan. I didn't actually support referring it back a year ago. I was prepared to support, at that time, some of the recommendations. They have changed since, but at that time I was prepared to support it. I thought there had been much consultation done, but I'm not prepared to support a full referral at this time, so I'm speaking in opposition. Thank you.
Councillor Dejanova?
Thank you. I do have a point of information
Okay.
through you to staff, and that is, I'm wondering how this is considerate of other types of housing aside from rental. And for instance, in looking at what is included in this referral motion, I'm looking at how it considers, for instance, not only the nonprofit owned housing, but also affordable home ownership. And how are we considering that? But also, how are we considering land assemblies? So for instance, if duplexes are driving up prices right now of land, if they are, and we've heard speculation that that's happening, that a new half duplex with half the land stratified costs more than the whole. I'm wondering if you can tell me, how is this, like for instance, near Joyce SkyTrain Station, when council last term considered many different forms of development to make room for and to make way for that, not to just have perhaps what was built there dictate what moves forward before. How is this considerate of the prices that will be paid for new rental to be built in land assemblies outside of what's being proposed in this district schedule? Because I understand that there's rezonings that may move beyond this in the district schedule that could have an impact on affordable housing.
Staff, anybody there want to give that a crack? It seems to be a few parts to that question, point of information.
Sure, thank you. Dan Garrison from Planning. I think the first thing I'd say is that the intent of what we're talking about today in the Streamlining Rental Initiative is a focus on rental tenure. That doesn't mean it's exclusive in terms of all the work that we're doing. This initiative is focused on rental. However, we are right now, we have a study underway on models of affordable home ownership that we'll be bringing back to council in the new year in response to motions that council has passed in that regard. Through the Vancouver plan process, there's an intensive look at missing middle housing options underway now, looking at opportunities for different models of moderate scale densification and for new housing types that will include ownership options, that will include looking at different kinds of tenure. So I think that all of those aspects are underway. They're just not necessarily part of this initiative, which is really an initial focus on rental housing.
So just a quick follow-up to that. If we incentivize building one type of housing over another, are we concerned that that will be left behind by the time that moves forward and you come back to us with those reports, that there may not be land left in the district for that?
I think what we've found through most of the work we've been doing on this is that the rental that we're proposing right now is looking to have limited, if any, impact on the underlying land value that is in place today. And so that probably the bigger concern, particularly in the RS and RT areas going forward, is the existing land value and the escalation of single-family house values as they've been, and as we've seen in the east side since 2011, we've seen 108% increases in the price of detached houses, aside from any incentives for additional density. So I think those are the issues that we're facing.
Just with my last few seconds, I will say that I am supporting this, and it's not because I don't support the work staff have done. I do. I just want to understand it in the context of how it fits in with these other forms of housing. So thank you very much to staff for the work.
Councillor Fry.
I won't support this referral, and for reasons that others have already articulated. I think we've had ample time. We've heard from a lot of the public. It's time to make some decisions on this item. But I also find it very uncomfortable that the process has been used to deny some of my colleagues the opportunity to ask legitimate questions that they may have had over the course of talking to the public, hearing from the public, the many weeks we've had to digest this material, and to unilaterally and arbitrarily deny the rest of council the opportunity to ask important questions, I think is a real travesty. And I really hope that this is not setting the tenor for the rest of our term on council, because I think that's really a disservice to democracy and to the respect that I hope we have for each other here in these chambers.
Thank you, Councillor Fry. That's it for debate on this Councillor Hardwick's amendment to refer this report. So I'll call a vote on that proposed amendment. Councillor Dominato. Okay, Council, that fails with Councillors Kirby, Young, Blythe, Dominato, Boyle, Weave, Swanson, Fry, Carr, and myself in opposition. Thanks, Council. Going back to the main queue, Councillor Hardwick, you have the floor for 4.5 minutes.
Nope, that's it for now. Thank you.
Councillor Weave, up to 5 minutes.
Yeah, some of the questions earlier, the ownership model of one of these rental projects, could it be a co-op? Can it be a family that they would rent it to other family members? Could it be multiple people that are looking at creating kind of a co-housing model and renting a few of the units out? So are other types of housing tenure allowed under this rental policy?
Point of information to staff, Councillor
Yes,
Weave?
point of information, thank you.
Great, okay, thanks. Over to you, staff.
So under this policy, Under the bylaw changes we're making, we're defining residential rental tenure as rental housing, as well as nonprofit social and co-op housing. So that's the definition of rental tenure. In terms of can people rent out to can owners live there and rent out a unit? I think there is a provision in the RR2 that allows people to do that. Did you want to clarify?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Graham Anderson, Housing Policy. Just to clarify, in the RR1 zone, for the options, it would apply on a single lot basis, so small multiplexes up to 8 units. We've included a provision in the zoning that would allow for owner occupancy of one of the units in the project. What would not be possible, however, is to have separate owners occupying the individual units. It would require a single ownership for the whole entire project. And as a typical term in our housing agreements, we usually restrict the operation of a rental project that's secured to arm's length tenancies to ensure they're made available on the general marketplace. For those smaller single lot type projects, we could potentially look at flexibility on that front. But generally for larger and apartment style buildings, we would look to retain those standard provisions in housing agreements.
So that would not allow a family member to be able to rent out one or multiple units in one of these projects?
No, not as a standard term. It's flexibility we would look at potentially for a smaller single lot multiplex type project, and would allow for that single owner to occupy one of the units at on site, but that would be a departure from what we've typically allowed through our rental incentive programs.
Is the organization able to own it that would have different shareholders that would be part of that model? So would a Cajon model where ABC Corp owns it and the 7 people that rent are all owners or shareholders of ABC Corp?
So that's not the model that's anticipated here.
Okay.
This is typically a landlord model that rents out units, and there's a residential tenancy agreement that's required. But the models that you're talking about in terms of innovative, home ownership options, although that's not part of this work, we are looking at different models of affordable home ownership in other work that we're doing.
Okay, it'd just be great to see those options continue to be brought forward in policy. My next one's to Blair, and that's talking about the viability of these projects, and mostly the RR projects. Can you talk about if they're more viable on the west side of Vancouver, the east side of Vancouver, and if a nominal CAC of kind of the industrial rate of $3.01 was applied, would we still be able to get these projects built, and would they still be at the same rate?
Hi, Councillor Weeb, it's Blair here. Thanks for the question. So part one of your question, west side versus east side, our work is showing that the financial viability of the rental apartment projects is better or higher on the west side properties, particularly on what I would call larger single family lots on the west side properties. The constraint on the east side is the small lots have a high price per square foot of lot area, which is challenging. In regard to charging a CAC, our work shows that in the vast majority of cases there's no quote land left, which is where you would normally expect a CAC to come from. But I think as long as the CAC was very low and modest, I wouldn't expect it to have a significant impact on the interest in doing these sorts of projects, as long as applicants perceived that council would support the rezoning application when it came forward.
So as long as it was a fixed nominal amount that they knew prior to going into the projects, and they believed that those projects would get passed, then you'd see that the viability wouldn't change the amount that we'd see come brought forward.
We're at the
okay,
five
thank you.
Councillor Bly, up to 5.
Thanks, Mayor. I have an amendment.
Okay. Please go ahead.
I'm confirming we are in debate and decision right now. So
The report has been moved, and we are debating an unamended report recommendations.
Yeah. Okay. So we got a limit of 5 minutes to do everything we need to do.
Right, so you've moved an amendment?
Okay,
Or did-
so I wonder if I can just be moved to an amendment queue so I can introduce it?
We need to have a seconder?
Second, Councillor DeGenova.
Councillor DeSanova, so we are on an amendment queue. Councillor Bly, please go ahead, up to 5 minutes.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll be very brief. I know everyone is getting pretty tired here, but I just have put forward language that is up on the screen that allows for separate votes, both on the C2 and also the RR portion of the report.
Okay, right, so that was explained by the clerk, by the staff, that needed to happen in order to separate the different clauses.
That's correct. Thank you.
Okay, anything else to say on that?
No, only that in time, if this was to pass, then we'd be looking to clerks and staff just to be clear on how we would vote on all of the recommendations in accordance with this amendment.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kirby-Young.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I will support the separation vote, not because I personally intend to vote differently on it. I am inclined at this point, and I'm still hearing the debate, but I'm inclined to support the report in full and the recommendations. But I do believe in providing the opportunity for council members to be able to vote accordingly. And so I reminded, because it's the most recent example, I think during the budget, we had amendments, for example, where there was a bulleted format used that did not allow for separation of vote and enable council to kind of express their will on what policy components they may or may not support. And I don't think that that is a good practice. And so I'm going to support this to enable essentially severing, if you will, which has been a practice, and that allows council to exercise, I think I referred to earlier, the courage of their convictions, whatever those may be, with respect to the distinct components of the report that have been identified. But I do want to be clear, I'm not intending personally to not support the report, but I am supporting the separation. Thanks.
Councillor DeGenova.
Thanks. I just have a point of information for staff on
Sure.
on the RR districts that are, or the RR zones that are listed here. I'm wondering, it's the same question I had before. Don't need the data from Coriolis. I'm just wondering if you have at all had any communication with BC Assessment as to whether or not this would change best and highest use, thus changing the amount of taxes or increasing the amount of property taxes that current owners in these zones face? I'll wait till staff's microphone's on, and that's my only question. So.
Go ahead, staff.
Oh, microphone.
Thank you, Mayor Stewart. Yes, in response to the question, we've not been in contact with BC Assessment Authority about any changes, and partly that's that's standard, but that's also partly because of the analysis we've had that's demonstrated that we don't anticipate there to be significant changes in land value as a result of these policies or amendments.
Okay, and if there were to be, and this was adversely affecting residents, and we saw that, and current owners in these specific RR zones, I'm not going to read them all out, the ones highlighted in yellow. I'm just wondering if staff would then make further recommendations. I understand it's not the intent to displace people from their current.
Right, I'm not sure I can sort of speculate on that, because I think what we have in front of us today are zones that provide for relatively modest increases in density for only rental tenure housing. So because with what's in front of us today, we aren't seeing through our analysis a significant risk of land value increase. It's hard for me to speculate as to what we might try to put in place if we were to propose something different.
Okay, thanks. What I'll say in debate to this is I will support this amendment. However, I do have some concern hearing some of the speakers, especially one of the speakers who had talked about, the heart and soul and blood, sweat, and tears they pour into their home, and how they've really, this to them is important. They feel that they, want to help where they can. And, what I had heard, this is what I've heard. I'm not, reciting testimony, but I understood that there was a lot of fear of displacement and there was a lot of pride, and that was just one speaker who spoke of that. I'm not saying that I don't support this. I support this, but I do think that it goes back to that bigger question of the buck stops with us as council members. So maybe we need to have more public hearings. Maybe we need to be more efficient. But I want to make sure that we are considering this and not just kind of in any way giving the perception that we're skirting our responsibility or shielding ourselves from making decisions. So to a point made by one of my colleagues before, I think it's important we do make decisions, but then let's make those decisions. Let's not just change the goalposts to have those decisions make themselves for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dejanova. That is it for speakers to this one. So we're going to have a vote, and just to make sure everybody knows, this is a vote to make an amendment so these votes, the letters, can be separated and voted on separately. That has passed, Council. Okay, back to the main queue. Councillor Bly, you have 4.5 minutes on the now amended report recommendations.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm going to come back on in just a few minutes. Thanks.
Councillor Kirby?
I'll wait. Thanks, Mayor.
Councillor Dominato?
Thanks, Mayor. I have a couple of questions. We did move, correct, that we could allow questions still?
Yep, please go. A point of information. Go ahead.
Yes, a point of information. Thank you. Could staff just clarify 2 points for me? I recall that with our arterial and local streets, with this proposal that assembly of properties would be limited to 3, or there was I can't remember the number of feet. Have I been getting that right?
Hello, Councillor Dominato, Marie Lenahan. So to confirm, for the local streets, there is a cap on assembly of 100 feet, or typically 3 lots.
Okay, thank you.
For local streets, there's no cap on assembly for arterial.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. And then 2 more questions related to that is, given, and I recognize it was said that it's not, the viability isn't there for the townhomes or 8-plexes or 6-plexes, but if there was a property owner that wanted just to do it with their single property, would that be permissible? If going through, they would have to go through a rezoning process, not an assembly, just maybe it's 1 property or maybe it's 2.
Yeah, so homeowners have the option for single lot development, and they would be the small multiplexes. It would still require a rezoning to that district schedule, so the simplified rezoning process would still be triggered. But yeah, that is an option for multiplexes on single lots.
Okay, and then my last question is just around on the local street. I made an assumption that was that local street, these are the ones based on the map, right, directly behind arterials. Is it both sides of that local street this applies to, or does it apply to one side of the street?
It's one side of the street, so it's the arterial, then the lane, and then the block. Okay. It doesn't go across the local street.
Getting pretty granular here, but I didn't want to make an assumption. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Mayor. I'll pause there.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. Councillor Swanson?
Yeah, I sent an amendment.
I don't have my mic on. Point of procedure, Mayor?
Sorry, I just, yep, I'm going to stop Councillor Swanson's. Go ahead, Councillor
Yeah, Councillor
Carr.
Carr, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, I've noticed, Mayor, that many of my colleagues are using their time to debate, to actually ask questions. I'm wondering if it's possible to move under our procedure bylaw a second round of debate to the motion.
Second.
Yes, that could happen for sure. So
I
all
move
in
it.
favor? Yeah, so Councillor Carr moves, seconded by Councillor
it.
Dejanova. Yes, all in favor of a second round of debate, say yay.
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 Yay. Yay.
Any opposed? I hear none, so we do have a second round. Councillor Swanson, you're up, but do have a second round if you want them.
Can I move my amendment?
Yes, go ahead. You've sent it to clerks.
I have, yeah. So this is just to exclude Knight Street from the zones that this would apply to. And the reason for that is that this is the most polluted street in the country. And we don't want renters to be basically insulation for people living away from the arterials. If at some point in the future we get better, less traffic or more electric traffic on Knight Street, I think we could put it back in. But right now, I'm hoping that we can eliminate it for Knight Street just because of all the pollution there.
Okay, thanks. Do we have a seconder for this one?
Second.
Councillor Carr. Okay, we're on an amendment queue. Councillor Swanson, I see you on the amendment queue. Is there anything else that you wanted to say to this one?
No.
Okay, Councillor Dejanova.
I'm a little bit surprised by this amendment because this exclusively would leave this to a home ownership district. And I thought that we had policy that specifically spoke against that in Vancouver. While I have voted before with council, considering our climate goals and our healthy city policies and strategies. That being said, we also have we're in a housing crisis. This is an issue here. I think it's important to look at, and the way that I've been considering this and framing this from what I heard from speakers, from the careful and thoughtful work of staff, is I appreciate all of this. I just want to understand that it's fitting in a context of allowing even more affordable housing that may be more appropriate in a different staff recommendation that's brought to us, that we're not inflating land in making decisions. But at the same time, I think that if we're talking about housing mix and creating opportunities throughout our city, just to pick one street, I mean, I could pick others. I mean, there are other streets that are also truck routes. There's Clark Street. I mean, there might not specifically be here, but the way that I'm considering this is how are we more inclusive of housing in our city? And I understand that right now, maybe there's work that needs to be done, but I think I'd be going backwards to support one specific street and say that we wouldn't be moving forward with rental on it. So for that reason, I won't be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Boyle.
Mayor, it's Councillor Bly. I just want to check on whether a point of order comes ahead of.
You can do a point of order anytime you like.
Okay, well, I just want
You
to
have
call.
to let me know the letter of the point of order.
I'd say it's 8.7 and that it's frivolous. I'm just looking at the map for C2. There is no C2 really on Knight. And this amendment is speaking specifically to the C2 district schedules.
I don't think it's an out of order question. I think it's more of a content question. So I'm going to leave it to the debate of council to decide this one, but I think that might be something you want to bring up during your debate points. So I'll leave that there, and we'll go to Councillor Boyle to continue.
Thanks. Well, I appreciate the intention I heard of this to protect renters from living on highly polluted areas. I won't be supporting this amendment. It is very clear to me that the way to protect renters from living on polluted arterials is to legalize rental housing off of polluted arterials and not to continue to further limit rental housing in the few places where we currently allow it. So rather than adding Knight, which we just heard doesn't actually have much C2 on it, I think the better way to achieve this goal is to legalize rental housing off of all of these busy streets, Knight and elsewhere, so that renters have the basic health and human right of living in quiet, less polluted areas like those who can afford to purchase a home. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Bly. Up to 5.
Thanks, Mayor. Okay, well, since this is debate, and I would say that it's arguable that there is no C2 on Knight Street, I'm not going to support this amendment. And I think the sort of inflammatory comments around the way it was framed when there isn't actually any C2 on this lends more to politics than it does good policy. And so for that reason, I'm not going to support it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Swanson, you can still reply here up to 5 minutes.
I was just going to say that, you know, there's been a lot of research about the impacts of pollution from diesel and from trucks, from tires, from brakes, from fuel, and how it causes, you know, dementia, maybe causes autism, causes lung problems. And I just think we need to be conscious of this and try and prevent it as much as we can. So that's why I made the amendment.
Thanks, Councillor Swanson. Councillor Carr?
Yes, thanks. And apologies for not looking at that map first before I seconded, but I do believe this is an important issue to debate. Feel that it warrants some discussion around arterials versus non-arterials in general. So I actually am not going to support the amendment, but I'm not going to support it for a couple of reasons. One is that now that I know there's not much C2 on it, on that street, it sort of makes sense not to. But the more important reason to me is I absolutely believe we're moving more quickly to the kind of vehicular traffic in this city that will not create the kind of pollution and the diesel emissions that have been a cause for really grave concern around health impacts on families in particular. And especially young children or people with lung diseases. Maybe some of you don't know, but in Metro Vancouver, we did receive a report from the Port of Metro Vancouver in which they are moving to actually require much more stringent measures in terms of any of the container trucks that bring containers into the port, and including moving to non-diesel, obviously as those engines become available. But the requirements are becoming very much more stringent all the time. So I think that plus really good heat pumps and air cleaning in the buildings that we are requiring through our building code will take us in the right direction until we do get a zero carbon fleet of trucks and cars on the roads.
Thank you. Councillor Kirby-Young?
Yeah, thank you. I think that the issue of human health and, sorry, I think we're all tired. Human health and particulates is a really important consideration, but I would also just add a point that hasn't been raised already in addition to the points raised, for example, around plans for reduction in vehicular emissions, is that this council had also passed and provided direction to look at pollution mitigation measures with respect to building code and requirements. And specifically the discussion was around Knight Street, and the example was cited. But the importance as we both strengthen our building code from a climate and a green perspective, that we also look at it from a human health perspective. And I know that in some of the rezoning applications we had, I believe it was just one last week, I'd asked a question about offices, for example, and how they're being mitigated. And we're starting to see a lot more measures taken in terms of how windows are reinforced, air circulation systems for quality of air, all of those things that are now much more top of mind because we have and are continuing to live through a pandemic. And so I think that there is some direction in place to try to mitigate, in addition to the points that were raised about vehicular reduction. So I won't support it because I think that council has identified that priority already. Thank you.
Thanks so much. That's it for debate on this item, so we'll call a vote on this. Councillor Dominato? There we go. That fails with all council in opposition except for Councillor Swanson. Okay, Council, we are back now to the main queue. Councillor Swanson, do you have anything else on this?
Nope.
Okay, Councillor Bly?
Thanks very much. I just have one additional point of information to staff, and that is regarding the setback. So in the RR zones, if there were to be, in the recommendation in the report, the townhouses stacked 4 stories or multiplex 3 stories, and then we've got the residential apartment 4 stories. I'm just curious, what are the policy allowable setbacks for the different building types? And maybe, if I can simplify, because I have limited time, the recommended setback or the allowable setback for the residential apartment 4-story is what? I believe I read it's 10 feet, but I just want to be sure that that is correct.
Staff?
Hello, Councillor Bly, Marie Linehan, Development Planner. Are you asking what the front yard setback is for the townhouses off arterial?
The off arterial residential apartment 4 stories.
So that's 12 feet. So it's a consistent front yard for all the typologies off arterial of 12 feet for apartments and townhouses.
Okay, and I did read in here that under some situations it would be considered that 10 feet would be allowable. Is that correct? If not, I can go off and find the page.
Yeah, you could probably find the page and then we can confirm. But in general, we can consider relaxations if there's a context to support it. So 12 feet is the required yard, and then we can vary that.
And how does that differ from perhaps adjacent single-family homes if they were to?
So adjacent single-family would probably be around 24 feet, 20 to 24 feet. Built under the current rules. So it is a lesser front yard setback. And
so we would have a building 10 feet or 12, and then the next single-family home, let's say that's beside it, would have met the requirement of a 24-foot setback.
Yes, it will be set further back, and I'll just explain the intent behind that was to pull the new building forward to allow more space in the rear yard. For amenity space and gathering, and also to reduce the impact of the building depth on the adjacent rear yards. So we see people...
Okay, so a quick follow-up. Why wouldn't we do that at the front of the building, given that you want to bring sort of life to the street side of where people are walking, passing by, and we hear about shadows, things like that. So why wouldn't we actually have that at the front of the building?
So pulling the building forward will reduce the massing and shadowing impacts on the backyard, which is what people primarily use for all their, socializing and whatnot. The new buildings will have ground floor entries for each unit and patios along the front. So even within that 12-foot setback, that's a setback we typically see in townhouse zones like the Canby corridor. So it's still sufficient space to have an entry patio and a landscape front yard per unit, and that will serve to activate the street.
Will that impact more requirement for tree removals? Just given some of the old growth that we see in some of the areas that are identified in the dark and light blue areas on the map?
Yep. So there is the potential for tree removal whenever you move from a smaller to a larger form. We're very aware that there could be additional tree removal. I will say, even with redevelopment to single-family homes, laneway houses and such, garages, we do see tree removal internal to the site.
Right, but when we have an assembly of 3 lots together, the impact is triple what we would normally see with a different type of development.
Yes, that is correct. So our focus with the new zones is on the perimeter of the site, either a single lot or an assembled site. So we do have some regulations and guidelines to facilitate tree retention at the perimeter, including pulling parkades back from the site edges. So yes, we do see the challenges. And
there'll be parkades for some of these the 4-story and the RR, so they would be using the back alleys to come and go?
They would use
Correct,
back alleys to come and go. Parkades, you know, it's a potential that they may be proposed, but as outlined earlier by staff, there is a
not
significant parking reduction, so surface
Thank you.
parking would be an option.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you, Brett. But, okay, Councillor Dejanova.
I'm not sure why I'm on. I did not
Okay,
put
I'll
myself
move
on
on.
the queue. Thank you.
Councillor Weep. You'd be in your second round, Councillor Weep.
Yeah, I'll allow the other councillors go ahead now.
Okay. Councillor Carr, up to 5.
Yes, thanks. Gives me an opportunity to ask some questions. I think I noted Edna Cho mentioning that I might have got or heard it wrong. 3/4 of new households to Vancouver are renters. Was that what you said, or did I just mishear it? Sorry, I can't. To Mike.
Not on, sorry. 76% of net new households are renters. So
Wow.
that's correct.
Thank you. Is it still the case that about 51% of Vancouver are renters overall, or has that changed?
It's 53% of households.
53 now, okay. Median, do you know the median income and the median age of renters?
Don't know the median age of renters, but median income is 47,000.
47,000, thank you. Page 3 of the report states that public engagement in the Vancouver plan resulted in these proposed changes. So I've already noted some of that data, but if there's any others that you can add about what it was that you received in public feedback that informed this set of recommendations.
Yes, so we scaled back the locational criteria based on the principles of Vancouver Plan around complete and connected neighborhoods. So we wanted to ensure that when we were putting a rental in the areas that they were within a 50-minute walk to daily needs, shops, and transit. So that's one change we did. We know that through the Vancouver Plan and all our other engagements that deeper levels of affordability are really important, and people want to see more types of affordable housing in neighborhoods across the city, including below market rental and social housing. So we've added that, made those changes here as well.
Great.
Sorry, one more thing. And just to say that, you know, with the Vancouver Plan, what we're really seeing is a lot of support for low-rise middle forms, so 6 stories and under. And so, you know, we want to ensure that the forms we are proposing here are in alignment with, you know, those forms that people are looking for.
That was the last question I was going to ask, which was any indication around heights. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kirby-Young?
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Kirby-Young, before we go, we are at 12 minutes to 5 with a break schedule at 5. So might be helpful if we wanted to finish this debate decision to have an extension, if somebody wanted to approve that, to work until we finish this and then take a dinner break.
So I'll move to extend on this specific item, not the full meeting agenda, but just this item.
Okay, thanks very much. You have a seconder for that?
Councillor Boyle.
Councillor Boyle, thanks. All in favor of extending to finish this item, say yay.
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 Any opposed, say nay.
Nay.
I've got a nay, so we'll have a vote on this. Voting to extend past dinner to finish this item and then take a break for dinner. Councillor Dominato. That has passed with Councillor Bly and Dejanova in opposition. Councillor Kirby-Young, please go ahead for 5 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. I've got a couple of follow-up points of information to staff. The first one is with respect to the point, sort of that for the non-C2 zones for the residential, this is an enabling policy, but rezoning is still required. And then the comment by staff that this could save half of the rezoning time. Can you indicate what you think the average zoning time is, and therefore what would be saved?
So the average rezoning time is between 11 and 12 months. So this potentially could reduce that by 6 months.
By 5 to 6 months in at half, at the 50%? Is that what I'm hearing? Yeah. Okay, thanks. And then following up, I'm looking at the slide deck from the original staff presentation, the PowerPoint that was done on November 2nd, and I'm specifically looking at the slides 22, 23, I think it is, which is the affordability piece. And so for the ability to go from 4 to 6 stories, which my understanding is not on the local streets, but on the arterial or the shopping, if below market units are included, can you clarify the chart isn't very clear, and I've got a couple questions on it. I wonder if you can clarify for the record the math on some of the charts. I think it's slides 21, sorry, 23 and 24, or no, 23 and 22. And it shows what the average market rents are, and then it shows what would be a 10% and a 20% discount, but that math doesn't seem to work off of the CMHC rent. So can you just walk us through that again, please?
Yes, absolutely. So the chart you're referring to, what we did was we looked at the CMHC rents for all of the CMHC universe. So that's the average rent across all of the units. And this, what it's representing, the pink bar on the chart is representing a 10% discount off of the average CMHC rents, and then the blue teal color represents a 20% discount off of average CMHC rents. I think one of the things that's confusing is that in our previous policies, especially when we're talking about the DCL waiver, we're looking at we're talking about rents on new market. So those are the rental units that are built in the last 10 years. So those are usually higher numbers.
Sorry, can you repeat back the key distinction? Because I'm not fully clear on that, and I want to make sure I really understand this.
So this is looking at average rents across the entire CMHC purpose-built rental housing, universe of rents.
In Vancouver as well?
In Vancouver, yes. And so
both new, old, existing.
Yeah, that's right.
Everything. Okay.
Yes, new, old, existing, everything. Yeah, most of it old. Yes. And so that's what the discounts are off. If we compare it to new market rents, the discounts are greater.
So are we looking at 3 bars that are not apples to apples then? Because the math doesn't work when you take the 10 or 20% discount off the gray bar. That's my simple question.
The gray bar is just a reference point to show what new market rents are. So that's the market rate.
Put another way, if I took the green, I'm sorry to belabor this point, but I think it's really helpful to be clear in terms of what the potential benefits are. So put another way, if I took the green and the pink bars and added 10 or 20%, that would be what somebody would pay going in that didn't have that discount versus a social unit in the same building. Is that fair? We should ignore the gray and we should just add 10 or 20% to the pink and green lines?
That will give you the average rent across of all of the market rental buildings, yeah.
Okay, because it is a bit confusing.
I can see, yes, your point. It is a bit confusing. We probably should have labeled it differently.
Okay, no problem. That's why I wanted to clarify it, because sometimes we get questions. The other question I have, and it might lead into, I think, an amendment that's coming out, but I'll start the question, which is in the financial analysis that was done and the commentary that you didn't, there wasn't envisioned there would be sort of a significant land lift due to, it was not increasing highest and best use over strata. If there had been a CAC proposed on the rental, would that have changed the financial analysis and the recommendations that were brought forward?
We'll have Blair comment on that from Coriolis.
Councillor, are you speaking about the C2 portion of this?
I'm speaking to all of it. In the RS, no, I'm speaking to the RS and RT component.
Okay, so in terms of CACs, our work showed that rental buildings are challenged to provide any CAC whatsoever. So if there was a significant CAC expected, it would negatively affect the results of our analysis. If the CAC is what I would characterize as modest, I think the city has charged $3 per square foot, for example, in the past, then at that level, it's unlikely to have a significant impact on the results of our analysis.
Okay, thanks. That's my time. I'll be coming back on that after. Thanks.
Councillor Weep?
Yeah, I've got an amendment.
Okay. Did you want to speak to it now or ask for a seconder, or how is it?
I'll speak to it now.
Okay.
Yeah, so I put an amendment forward to look at a nominal fixed rate CAC for the RR component of this project, and that's at the $3.01 per square foot, which is the same we do for an industrial, a school, or other facilities. From the conversations, this would not affect the number of projects. It also won't affect the affordability. It might slightly increase the amount of non-market and co-ops, so it could actually increase the affordability. It also does a lot of important things. One is that it builds what this is going for. The Vancouver plan is trying to create complete and connected communities. And to create a complete community, you need to have the amenities around. And most of our amenities in some of these areas don't have community plans. Fraserhood, Killarney, Dunbar. And so DCLs cannot be utilized to fix up a playground or to fix up a local amenity because you need to have a component of a CAC or others, and then the DCL can fund could fund the washroom or could fund an extension, but we can't actually deliver livable communities if we're not building CACs. This is a very nominal rate. We've heard directly from the development community that it needs to be a fixed number. They need to know going into buying the property, moving forward, that the rate is fixed and they know what it is. It's also a very nominal rate. It's at the lowest level we have in our city to ensure that we're delivering complete communities. And so I'm hoping that council will support it because I think it's critical for us to create good public policy that is clear, transparent, and delivers to our residents.
Second.
Thank you, Seconder, Councillor Fry. Okay, on amendment Q, I got Councillor Dejanova first. Councillor, just let me reset timers here. Go ahead, Councillor Dejanova.
Thanks. I have a question, a point of information for the mover of this amendment.
Yep.
Councillor Wiebe, you had said in your comments, correct me if I'm wrong, that this will not affect affordability of the rental units. There's only one taxpayer, and technically this all gets downloaded onto them. So can you tell me how you are certain this is not going to affect the affordability or the rents to add a CAC on top of rental when we usually only see CACs on strata, and in very rare situations we'll see a CAC on rental, but you're asking that this be a requirement of everything in a specific schedule in a district?
Yes, so this is just for the RR and it is just for market rental. So market rental, we rent it out at a market rate.
So who's paying the $3 a square foot? Who?
The developer or the person selling the property?
Okay, so they're paying it?
Yes.
Okay, and you think they're not going to download those costs because we have no control on downloading?
Well, they're going to be renting their properties at market rate. That's how, right? It's going to be the same market. This plan and staff have done a fantastic job in finding different ways to reduce costs to build the rental.
I just wanted to know the question. So you believe, but do you have developers that have, well, we can't speak outside of public hearing to anyone. I didn't hear a developer on the speakers list who put their hand up and said, I want to pay $3 CAC, and out of the goodness of my heart, I'm not going to download this. So I'm just asking,
we did have speakers.
Where is this factual information?
We did have speakers talk to it when they came and spoke to us.
Yes, but was there a developer who said, I will be able to do this?
Yes.
And offset this cost myself, the $3?
No, the number wasn't, but they talked about if there was a nominal amount, they would be able to move forward.
I now have a point of information to staff, Mayor, if I may. And the point of information to staff is this a consideration you made, but were you concerned that this may, A, adversely affect rents or affect pro formas to the point where it would make a project not viable? Technically, because we valued rental housing, and to encourage rental housing to be built, we normally don't see a CAC charged with that.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Councillor. I think I would characterize it as we didn't think of proposing a CAC because our normal approach to proposing CACs is looking for areas where we see increases in land values as a result of rezoning. Because the financial analysis didn't show that, we did not recommend CACs for this. I would say that we have heard through the process, one of the things we heard and through the public hearing was concerns about increases in population and without a commensurate ability to pay for other other public benefits. So, you know, I understand where the motion is coming from that
I
perspective.
understand that, and I appreciate that. That's not my question. My question is, will this make pro formas under what's being proposed in the recommendations? Will this make pro formas, will pro formas still be viable with a $3 a foot CAC on top of what's already being proposed? And will this come at the expense of non-market housing? Will this come at the expense of non-profit housing?
Well, I would just say all we could do is go with the advice of our economic consultant at Coriolis, and that's been that essentially, as provided the CAC amount is fixed, is known upfront, and remains relatively small. The advice from our consultant is that it wouldn't have a major impact on the economics. And so I can just reiterate that because that is the advice that we would rely on.
But ultimately, someone would be paying for this $3 a square foot.
Well, that's correct. And there is always one of three people to pay. One is the existing landowner, the other is the developer, and the third is the eventual renter. And I do think that our usual approach to that is that the market would determine the rent, and therefore it would either be coming out of the land value or the developer profit.
Do we see something like this in cities like North Vancouver or the city of Burnaby that are moving at like rocket speed with housing? Do we see a fixed rate CAC on top of rental? Only have a few
I'm not aware of. I haven't looked at all their financing growth policies on rentals.
I'll just quickly say I won't be supporting this for the many reasons I think I've made.
Thank you. Councillor Fry.
Yeah, I will be supporting this, and thanks, Dan Garrison, for supplying that sort of articulation of how this won't impact the viability. I think Councillor Weave's done a very good job of putting this together, and it does actually contemplate not impacting below market rate rentals, which I think is sort of the critical distinction here. So it won't get in the way of co-ops or social housing or non-market housing. And it's a tool, because what we recognize, and I think it's interesting, Councillor DiGenova had brought up the issue of Burnaby. Of course, we know that Burnaby has amassed a significant war chest of CACs that they've allowed to reinvest into their communities to support rental housing that's below market and to support robust community centers, pools, parks, that kind of thing. We just went through a knockdown, drag them out budget process. And I think we all recognize that in particular, parts of our city in the west side, for instance, have rather threadbare facilities in their community centers. And this actually, the intent of CACs, of course, is to support community amenities. And I think this is entirely reasonable as a tool to support those community amenities where we're going to be adding significant density. And I think that those new residents and the existing residents will all benefit from those contributions that will amortize out over the life of the rental building, and it will work out in the end. And I think it will support much needed amenities in the city, because we know that we just don't have the resources to support the renewal of all these facilities that we need to do in a timely manner. The money's got to come from somewhere, and I think this is a really excellent solution to what's an obvious potential problem with these RR rezonings. And I think it actually adds the kind of juice that makes these RR rezonings work, and it does target the market component, which of course is what the market will decide. So I'm totally supportive and comfortable with this amendment. I thank Councillor Weeb for putting in the work to make this work, and thanks to Dan Garrison for articulating that it does work, pencil out. So support.
Councillor Boyle.
Thanks, Mayor. I have a couple questions for staff, because I didn't hear what Councillor Fry seems to have heard, that this would pencil out. So I'm hoping through you I can ask a couple points of order of or points of information of questions to staff on this. And the first one is that I am interested to hear if staff think that this added CAC would result in fewer rental homes being built in the under this policy.
Yeah, Dan Garrison again. Maybe I'll chime in. I think again, from what Blair Erb at Coriolis Consulting has told us about this, is that as long as the amount remains modest and low, that it would not significantly impact a decision of a developer as to whether they would acquire a site and move forward with the project. And so I think that's the right way to think about it, though, in that, we look at whether it would be an issue, whether it would affect affordability, but again, rents would be set by the market. The question is, would it affect viability? In other words, would it affect an applicant's decision as to whether or not to move forward with the project? And so just to, again, to clarify, I think what we're hearing from Blair is that as long as that amount is fixed, clear, and relatively low, he didn't think that it would significantly affect most decisions in that way.
Okay, so it may affect the end rate of the rent, but it won't be a deciding factor in terms of a project being initiated or not. That fair?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, I think we would not. I'm not sure I would agree that it would affect the end rent, because if it applies only to market rental projects, then generally speaking, market rental owners will rent the property at what the market will bear. It'll be determined by the market and not by the cost up front. And so that's why I say it's a viability issue rather than an affordability issue. And so it would be more about that upfront decision as to whether or not to proceed.
Okay, I appreciate that clarification. I am intrigued by exploring this approach, I guess, but nervous about it being added at whatever hour we're in of this very long process we've been through. There have been many studies, plenty of consultation. I'm nervous about what I heard to be sort of a number made up based on the lowest amount of CAC we charge in an industrial zone to be pegged onto these projects without a really clear sense of what the impact is. Again, I just think so much work has gone into this that I am nervous about throwing throwing amendments that we don't know the impact of in at the very last minute. I would be interested in and supportive of this being explored in terms of an expansion of this proposal down the road, or in terms of other proposals within the Vancouver plan. I know staff are looking at all of these questions. I just remain very nervous about a pretty ad hoc amendment at the end of a very extensive process. So I will leave it there.
Thank you. Councillor Dominato.
Thanks, Mayor. I have a point of information through you to staff, and
Sure.
It's picking up a little bit on Councillor Boyle's questions and Councillor DiGenova's, and I'm referring to Appendix M, page 1 of 7, and the reference that in some RS and RT areas, a 6-story market rental option on our trails generates the potential for land value increases. It goes on to say that this can be mitigated by requiring a portion of all 6-story buildings to be permanently secured at below market rates, thus absorbing any increases in land value. And I won't read the rest of the paragraph you have in front of you, but I am curious for staff and others to comment on the implications of adding this at this time and what that might mean for the ability to have below market rates, as well as the fact that it actually specifies there's certain RSRT areas of the city where we likely might see this land value increase, but not necessarily all of them. So why would we go down the path of a blanket CAC for all rental projects? I hope that's clear, and I have the page here if you want to see it. But.
So I can comment on the first part. I believe the amendment that Councillor Weeb has put forward exempts this CAC charge to the below market rental unit. So that would be exempt from having to pay the CAC.
And then what about the looking at it from a targeted perspective? So because in the report here, it specifically said there's certain areas where you'll see that land lift, but others you may not. And so why not look at it on a case-by-case basis where you're seeing that, as opposed to this is basically what I read is this would apply to all new market rental projects, with the exception of, as you pointed out.
Right. So just for clarification, the CAC policy currently doesn't exempt six-story rental projects in our in RSRT areas from CAC review. So these projects going through rezoning will have to go through a review anyway, just to ensure that you know, there isn't any lift and everything is the way it should be. And so that is something, as we've indicated in the council report, that we'll be looking at in a future update of the CAC policy.
Would it be fair to say, though, that this would apply to all new market rental projects, regardless of there being lift or not, the CAC?
It would apply to all the ones that are not below market.
Yeah, so
in RSRT.
Okay, so so I'm getting to the point I was trying to make, is that it is sort of blanket with the exception of below market. Okay, thank you. That's it for my questions, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilor Kirby-Young.
Yeah, thanks. I want to ask a couple of clarifying questions just to be crystal clear on this. And that is that I know it says apply a nominal fixed rate to new market rental projects in RSNRT covered by secured rental policies. I just want to be really clear that the two on the arterial and the shopping streets, the two opportunities to go up to six-story that requires inclusion of below market rental, does that exempt those six-story buildings? The entire building? Does it exempt the units specifically within those? Because I just want to clarify, are those then considered a social housing project and exempt from this because they have the inclusion of the below market?
The way that the amendment is written, that this charge of $3.01 per square foot would not be applied to those six-story below market rental units on arterials.
To the unit, the below market units, or
the
to
building,
the entire six-story building?
The building.
The building as a whole. Okay, so that's clear. I wanted to, okay, and then my second point is because there's two components to this, there's two that's in here. Oh, I see it's now further. The version I had was just a that. So I was anxiously and eagerly awaiting the report back on the CACs and the DCLs. And was staff not already doing that work as part of that review? Was that the intention, that you're also looking at the ability to apply, recognizing that we have a shortfall in our ability to deliver community amenities? Was that part of the existing consideration for that CAC policy and DCL review, that we look at applying them to rental projects?
So there is a review on the 10-year DCL underway, where we're just looking at the overall question of how to fund growth. So, you know, in terms of the overall context of that work, we are looking at how to fund growth.
So if we had, let me ask the question explicitly then, had we not had the second part of the amendment, the one that now says further that, staff would be including rental as part of that overall global consideration of how to fund growth. That would be happening anyway. That's my question.
It would be, except that making this, looking at this like this specific target rate, you know, we do need to do some work to see what the implications would be on the CAC policy for rezoning. So it would be good for us to, if this passes, for us to then look at the CAC policy for rezoning to make any potential adjustments, or to.
So you're saying that you were not looking at target fixed rates as part of the overall CAC review? I want to be crystal clear on this. That's why I'm trying to get a straight, clear answer.
Maybe I'll jump in. The main thing that we're looking at in specific detail right now is through the DCL rate review and the DCL waiver process that's available for rental housing, and how the DCL waivers apply, where they apply, and all that. This would be looking at community amenity contributions, and flat rates related to rental is I think new scope.
Okay. That's what I wanted to clarify. So this would expand the scope of the work that's underway. Okay,
I believe it would, yeah.
Okay, that's super helpful. That's very clear. And put another way, because my colleagues have asked questions around whether or not this would impact affordability, do you think a rate of $3.01, the lowest industrial rate, is leaving money on the table?
I mean, it's a good question. I mean, right now, from the input we have from Coriolis, we don't see significant amounts of land lift. And so, you know, that would indicate that it wouldn't be leaving money on the table. However, I think, you know, where I see the rate of $3.01 square foot aligning with is the current CAC rate for institutional uses, which is another use that typically doesn't generate land lift. And so that's where I think the logic is. And so But that is something that I think we could look at through the sort of the second half of this amendment if it's
then
passed.
last point, just for clarity too, that in with the context, we have a huge gap in our ability to deliver amenities, and we're seeing transition to rental because that's the housing that we need, and it doesn't deliver right now. In terms of those CACs, it's lower, but we're not talking about a lot of cash here based on the size of these buildings and $3 per square foot. It's better than nothing, but we're not talking about a lot of cash coming in to fund amenities, are we? Ultimately, really, based on this math.
No, I think it would be a relatively small amount, a contribution from each project. And that bigger issue of how we pay for growth with the shift towards rental is what we need to tackle through the 10-year DCL review that we're doing now.
Right, okay, helpful context, I'll leave it there, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dejanova, could you take over the chair while I make a few points here?
Of course. Go ahead, Mayor Stewart.
Thank you so much. I'll let the clerks manipulate the queue. This is a tough one for me. I really understand where Councillor Weeb is coming from and Councillor Fry's comments. I think they were good ones about because these are not OCP areas, how do we fund amenities within these parts when we have extra density or these neighborhoods. However, I am a couple of things worry me. First of all, I was just thinking about say somebody that has this a single detached lot and they're trying to decide what to do with that lot. It is going to be complicated to buy, more complicated to build a 4-story rental building in the new RR zone. It's a lot easier and a lot more understandable to build, a duplex that doesn't have a CAC cost attached. So in a way, this puts a tax on new rental and not a tax on the single detached home or duplex option that owners already have. And even though it's a low level and would help perhaps support some amenities, it is a disincentive. And for me, I'm really intrigued by this idea. It's in the Making Home Proposal 2 that I have. But I would really want to take a look at this. I am nervous when there's an exact number of $3.01, and this is the first time we really heard about it. It may be too low, it may be too high, but what I'd say is it's a qualified or definitely a support for staff to add this in their current exploration of this funding mechanism, but no to putting in some right away. Councillor, we did introduce this as saying get staff to look at, but as I read the amendment, it's put in place. And so I can't vote to put this in place right now, but I would definitely support a look at this, and I think it could be an important contribution eventually. So thanks to Councillor Fry, but I'll be Councillor Weeb, but I'll be voting against this.
Thanks. I'll hand the chair back to Mayor Stewart.
Dejanova. Councillor Hardwick at 5.
Thanks. So how far would this go to cover amenities?
Is that a point of information to staff?
Yes, through you, a question, a point of information to staff.
Okay, thank you. Staff?
Thank you. Yes. Well, just to be totally honest, we haven't done analysis on it, so we don't really know how far it would go towards. So there's two parts of the answer to your question, I think, Councillor Hardwick. One of them is an assessment of the amenity needs, and then the other is how much revenue this would generate towards that. And at this point in this process, we haven't done either of those two parts, right?
Well, I was going to ask about, I think it's safe to say that property taxes and capital budgets would still cover most of the amenity costs.
Mm-hmm.
So this would be a token amount, or how significant would it be from your perspective?
Right. I mean, it's a good question. Again, we haven't done math, but certainly when we look at the amounts that that our typical DCL revenue is our primary driver of covering the cost of growth. So it would certainly not be anywhere near the impact of our typical DCL where, but it it would generate some revenue.
10%? 10% maybe?
I don't think I could hazard a guess at a percentage. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Carr.
Yes, thanks. I'm just going to speak briefly in support of this amendment and thank Councillor Weed for putting it forward and thank staff for providing him with some input prior to the tabling of that amendment. You know, in all the time I've been on council, I think I've heard over and over again how our communities, our neighborhoods need more public amenities. There's a shortage of them. There's high demand for them. They contribute to quality of life and livability in this city, and they become ever more precious with situations like the COVID pandemic. So how we pay for them has always been somewhat of a tax-based solution and somewhat of growth pays for development. And growth, I always thought that growth would pay for way more development than it has done. I think it should do more. I think this is a small amount. It's the same rate as the institutional rate, the lowest rate that there is for CAC. And so I think, given that staff have tentatively said, well, we could explore this, I think we should. So thank you, Councillor Weed, for putting it forward.
Councillor Swanson.
Yeah, through you, Mayor, can I ask the mover a question?
Sure can.
Have you estimated how much revenue this would bring in?
Councillor Weed.
I've not been able to do a full calculation on how much. However, I have been looking at the opportunities to see what this would do for affordability.
So I've been scrolling out some numbers here, 4,700 units we think we might get if they're 800 square feet each. That's about 3,700,000 times 3%. So we're looking at about 10 million altogether if the whole, if all of the units get built out like the staff has predicted over the next 10, so it's like 10 million over 10 years. Is that kind of what you were looking at?
I have trusted your numbers in the past.
You had what?
I have trusted your numbers in the past, but I can't do that on the fly right now.
Yeah, okay. So we're not talking about a massive amount here, and I think it's good to at least begin the precedent of having market rentals pay CACs. So I'm going to be supporting this.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Swanson. That is it for debate, and so we're going to move.
Point of procedure, Mayor.
Okay, Councillor Kirby.
Is it possible to sever these two clauses?
Let me take a look here. I don't think, I'm sorry, I just haven't got it in front of me. They are not written as two, they're written as a single, clause, so no, there's nothing to separate here.
Oh, okay. I was asking because we have severed when we've had like 3A, 3A1 in the past.
Yeah, we don't have that here. That's, so I'll double check with clerks and I'll come right back to you.
Sure.
Okay, council. You've had a chat, the clerks and I. This is a new one because usually when we sever either amendments or main motions, that they are already separated out in one way or another. This one is not. However, the two clauses do seem to be distinct, meaning that if you look at the word that staff report back in Q2 2022, that part of the amendment is not contingent on the first part passing. So indeed, we can view them as distinct and split it into two votes. So um, that's one for the record books. And so what we'll do on the vote here is I will call the vote on the first clause first, which is the directing staff to apply a fixed rate community amenity contribution to rezoning applications. Then the second vote would be on that staff report back in Q2 2022. And we'll highlight both of those as we go through the voting. So I hope that answers
Point of
your.
procedure, Mayor.
Go ahead, Councillor Genova.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure, because we are technically, although we closed off the speakers list, we are technically still sitting under public hearing procedure. That the further that in the second clause, is that only specifically on this district schedule, or is this the CAC fixed rate all over? Because rarely do we make policy referrals and reports to staff that are outside of the purview of public hearing in a public
Yep.
hearing. I'm
So,
asking.
Good point of procedure. Really the restricted part on the public hearing ends when we close the receipt of public comment. And from there on in, it really is more like a council debate on whether or not we make a decision. So because it is a very wide ranging, it isn't about a distinct building or a heritage designation. It is on a policy decision. So policy instructions are in order. So, for example, the decision to, the question of whether to refer back the whole thing was in order. This is also in order.
Okay,
So,
but my question is, will this be on fixed rate CACs only in this district schedule that are being proposed? Or is this going to be citywide?
I'll have to let you read through it and see your interpretation. That's not really a point of procedure.
I was just asking so I'd know what I was voting on. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Anybody else? Point of procedure or anything like that? Okay, so we're going to call the first vote, clerk. So this gets you to highlight. The first vote is on the first half of this proposed amendment. And the votes are in, and that has failed with Councillor Kirby, Young, Blythe, Dominato, Boyle, Hardwick, Dejanova, and myself in opposition. And then we'll move to vote on the second part. Oops. Councillor Hardwick, Dominato, and Blythe. And that has passed with Councillor Hardwick and Dejanova in opposition. Okay, Council, so that's it for Councillor Weeb. Do you have, in your second round, you have about 3 minutes left?
No, I just want to thank staff for the amount of work. I mean, it's a long one right after a budget. I know it's been split forward, but there's some amazing structural work in here. I know you can tell the amount of time to create policies that are going to allow rental in every neighborhood across the community, and I think that's pretty important for us to move forward. As well as some unique guidelines and opportunities for us to change the way the city's built, but in a way that's reflective of what the city's asking for. And it's exciting to see some of the city planned quick moves moving forward. So thank you very much to staff, all the speakers that came, and everyone that sent us correspondence. It's been intensive, but I think it's been very helpful, and I appreciate the dialogue today. And I'm glad that the second component of the amendment passed, because I think we need to look at all options to deal with amenities. So thank you.
Councillor Boyle.
Thanks so much. I had many notes, but I'm going to keep it brief because I know we have been debating this for days and days, and folks are probably hungry for dinner. I want to speak just briefly to a few reasons why I think that this policy, the whole of it, is incredibly important. And the first is that it's an important part of our climate plan. When our climate emergency plan first came forward, it was pretty groundbreaking in its recognition that land use and housing are important policy levers for addressing climate change. And I regularly hear from locally elected leaders across the country who are interested in what we are actually tangibly doing on that front. This is our first real big move related to Big Move 1 around complete communities. And I hope that we support the whole of it, not just a half measure. We know that meeting our climate targets requires us to follow through on every piece of the climate plan. And so the whole of this report is part of that. It's also an important part of complete communities, and we have heard from small businesses their support for more renters in their neighborhood. We have heard from people time and time again who want to live in walkable communities, and building rental housing on and off arterial is an important piece of that. And to the comments and considerations about splitting this out, I just want to reiterate how important it is that we don't only allow renters or don't focus the majority of renters and secure rental housing on arterials only. There's a huge equity and fairness question here in terms of policy that has been in place for decades here and in cities around the globe, around the continent, certainly, that have used rental housing as a buffer against noise and pollution for the rest of residential neighborhoods. It's absolutely unfair to renters, and it's a policy I can't support continuing. And so I hope that we not only approve the portion of this plan that allows new secure rental housing on arterials, but also off of arterials, because those are residential neighborhoods, and renters are and deserve to be residents within them, in secure, stable housing, not just in basement suites. And lastly, I just want to say that we were elected to lead. I think I wish we had passed this policy a year and a half ago. I wish we were accomplishing more on the housing file, considering that it was a key issue of the last election. And we have, in my opinion, not done nearly enough on that front. But this is an early quick start action out of the citywide plan. And I have a lot of concern that if this doesn't pass, the rest of the citywide plan will be in question. And quite frankly, I think people will have very valid questions about whether that citywide plan was worth doing at all, considering how little we have accomplished out of it so far. So I think this whole report is incredibly important. Staff have done a very thoughtful job. We have done an incredible amount of consultation on it, and I hope that this evening we pass the whole report, and I look forward to moving forward with more moves in this direction to build, to legalize rental in every neighborhood. Thanks.
Councillor Dominato.
Thanks, Mayor. I circulated an email, and it was to pose the question of whether we could move reconsideration of our vote to complete this item before dinner. Just noting, I have a bit of a strained neck and feeling a little exhausted, and whether council would indulge me in the reconsideration of that, and to break for dinner for an hour.
Second of the reconsideration motion.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm just gonna have to check with staff here. I'll be right back with you, Councillor Dominato.
Thank you.
Hey, Council, I just been chatting with clerk. So just to give you, to let you know what's on the table, Councillor Dominato, who abstained from the vote to um, extend past 5 p.m. to debate this matter, is eligible to reconsider that vote or to offer or to ask us to reconsider that vote because an abstain is counted in the positive. So if that is, I think it has been seconded, so by Councillor DeGenova. So as we move, this is a debatable. I'm going to move us to a different queue here, and it is a debatable motion. If we decide to rescind this, what we then do is go back to the original motion, which is that we move past 5 p.m. to consider this until completed. We would have to vote on that again. However, that could be amended to reflect a different time. So with that in mind, I will ask, I don't see anybody on the queue to debate this, so I'm going to ask for a vote. I'll go verbal first. If people are okay with rescinding our previous decision, then to go back and vote again on whether or not we should extend past 5. So I'll just ask our people in favor of rescinding our previous decision, say yay.
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 Any opposed? Okay, so we've rescinded the decision. We are back. Just pretend we've had a motion that's been put forward that we extend past 5 p.m. to, sorry, this says reconsidered. I meant I got the wording wrong. It's reconsidered rather than rescind. So we are reconsidering the motion as to whether or not we should extend past 5 p.m. to finish this item. This can be debated or amended. I see Councillor DeGenova on the queue.
Mayor Stewart, if you need me to, I can try and send something in writing. If not, I just suggest that we take our regular hour-long dinner break now, and we would reconvene at 6:40. If you need me to take a minute, I can type that out for you.
Well, let's just see how we go. Do we have a seconder for that?
Second, Councillor Kirby-Young.
Okay, thanks. The motion to recess essentially right now is not debatable, so we can I'll take a verbal vote. All in favor of recessing now, say yay.
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 Opposed, say nay. Great, so we're recessed now. We'll come back at 6:40 to finish this item. And next up on the queue is Councillor Dominato is on the queue, followed by a number of other councillors. So we'll see you back in an hour. Thank you, clerks and staff.